I guess we're on a kick of related QA podcasts. In this podcast, we're going to explore a exclamation that I heard once at a networking event. I have 500 bugs in my backlog. And we all recoiled and, I don't know, made a protective sign of whatever our religion of choice was. Yeah, exactly. 500 bugs in your backlog. And I don't remember the summary of that conversation, but for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to make up a new summary.
I like it.
Listen, when I first heard this as a concept, theoretically, metaphorically, philosophically, I said, like, who hurt you? Who inflicted this on your culture? Because, like, if there's 500 bugs in your backlog, like, something is wrong with your corporate culture or development culture, whatever. Like, the culture of your organization, something's wrong with your organization. Why do you have 500 bugs in your backlog? What has gotten out of hand? That was my immediate initial take, coming from being a BA, QA analyst real early in my career, being a manager of QA, hiring a bunch of analysts and engineers over time. Yeah, this was my immediate response.
I like your immediate response better than what mine might have been, right? I have 500 bugs. What you been doing? Instead of, right? So, like, why do you have 500? Why did you let it get this far? It's like saying, look, my entire house is burning down and now the chimney's on fire. So what have you been doing this time, right? That would have been my reaction. But anyway, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. Somebody just said, look, I just realized we have 500 bugs in my backlog. Now what? So I think the context is important here. What is your backlog? What are you doing with your team? Is your team a firefighting team that is simply just taking these bugs from somebody's, and just whittling those down? And if you have 500, hopefully they're prioritized in some way. So that's one kind of easy out, right? If you like. Assuming that's not the case and you're just another development team that just happens to have a deep backlog because you have 500 bugs in your backlog. This person who is vocalizing, I have 500 bugs, who are they? What persona? Is that a product person? Is that it really doesn't matter in the long run. It could be anybody on the team that says, yikes, 500 is a big number. What now?
Well, to me, the product manager, it doesn't really matter to me who it is vocalizing that they have 500.
Yeah.
I'm also assuming it's 500 open bugs.
Sure.
Because if there's 500 bugs and you select all and close them, then congratulations, you have no bugs anymore. Yeah, you close them all. But to the QA manager inside of me, it worries me that your product is built on a mountain of constantly shifting sand. Indeed. And that everything's going to collapse at any moment. I think that there are cultural problems. That's my initial suspected area to start poking at, which is either your development team is constantly under pressure to deliver features, and nobody cares about the technical infrastructure, architectural runway, whatever term you use for it. Nobody cares that your application has to get rebooted. Nobody cares that your people do care. Just not the right people care that your developers are up in the middle of the night every other day, rebooting your servers or dealing with memory issues or trying to calm the database, talk the database off. Like, listen, your database is at the club drunk and it needs to get convinced not to drive home.
And he can't get an Uber. Yeah. You're so right on that, right? I mean, look, there's different scenarios here, right? One is, if people have watched our other podcast about, I don't have a QA on my team, that podcast. Yeah. Maybe you really don't have a QA on your team and you have 500 bugs and your developers are just insular in their thinking that all they do is develop. Maybe that's a scenario. I don't know. Well, it's easy to fix that, but there is that.
Yeah. You watch that podcast, because in that podcast we were talking basically the opposite of what we're talking about in this podcast. In that podcast we were talking about a very advanced development team who understood quality, who had testing skill set, who they were cross-functional, and they were in control of all the variables that it takes to make and maintain great software. In this, I'm saying something's wrong with your culture. I guess when I'm saying culture, maybe that's too heady of a word. Something's wrong with your process. Let me boil it down to your process. Yeah. Okay, that maybe there's a lot of handoffs. Maybe there's a lot of people fighting for ownership of little pieces of the application. Maybe things are split up too much. There's a million things of maybe, right? Here's another one. Maybe you have a rogue person that's just writing bugs like crazy, and they don't really understand that they've not been brought in and aligned with the product and or development teams to say, hey, this is how we need to best utilize your skill on the team. You need to help us understand and not write our stuff up after the fact. We need you at the beginning. Let's get things done the right way.
Yeah, I think let's unpack a little bit of that, right? So, the previous podcast was about a team that owned quality, right? This podcast is about really, we have a situation at hand, and how did it arise, and what do you do about it? So I want to go in reverse order now. Rogue QA. I think that kind of does a little bit of a disservice to the person, because they are a QA person and their job is to write up bugs, and that's what they're doing. Somewhat of a maybe a CYA type of situation. If they didn't, then they would get in trouble type of thing. But if a field on a screen is misaligned by 2 pixels, technically that's a bug. Technically, you could argue that, but is the whole thing still usable?
Well, I see where you're going, but if you're drawing a circle around your QA department, and then you're saying this QA department is measured and incented based on the number of bugs they find and the number of bugs that slip out to customers and the number of whatever, of course they're going to be kicking and screaming to not let a single piece of functionality out that could potentially come back on them, because that's the way the numbers and the metrics go. And you know what else we talked about in the last podcast that I had to really hold myself back from digging into is the culture where the sprint is 2 weeks, 10 business days. Development works for 9.5 days, and on the last day of the sprint, they put it into the QA status. Send it over to the QA column, team, whatever, and then the message that's communicated from development to product, not QA, not team, right? Because we're not teams at this point. There's circles around all of our departments. The message that's communicated is development finished in the sprint, and I don't like these QA people just can't keep up. They're being a bottleneck. Everyone listening to this, hopefully, everyone listening to this understands that what I just did, that's a game. We're playing games now. We're not being a team. And maybe they do, and maybe they understand it, but also when you're incented on things, you might understand that it's a game, but also you gotta play the game, or else you gotta keep that resume updated and keep
right. You gotta play the game if you want the incentives, because you are incented that way. Absolutely.
But when you get up to the leadership's level, and dare I say products level, those are the right people to push through all this stuff, to be like, look, you guys are a team. Like, nobody cares that it made through one phase or another phase or whatever. I care that it's in production. I had a CEO one time talking about definition of done. Well, I'm skipping ahead here, but
that's fine.
Talking about definition of done, this was rampant in that culture at a place I worked one time of people saying it's done. It's done, but now it's got to go through QA. It's done, but it's got to go through documentation. It's done, but it's got to go through UAT. It's done, but people do that all the time. Oh, it's totally done. It's done. I'm so great. And the CEO one time, I don't remember where he was, but he stamped his little fist down on the table. He's like, I don't want anyone to ever say something is done ever again until it's in production
in the customer's hands.
It's in the customer's hand, and the customer can use it, and the customer is aware that they have the ability to use it. Maybe you can't control customers, right? But the customer has the ability to go use it and have it work end to end the way that we promised that it would work. And once he laid down that mandate, that the culture started to get better. Quite honestly, the culture started to get better. We had no product people in that company at the time, so this is something that a product person would do: is say, hey, I don't care about all these games. We shouldn't be incented by these games.
Right.
We should be incented by value actually delivered into customer hands. Sorry, I don't know why I did Captain Kirk there. Value delivered into customer hands.
It's got to be in their hands at the end of the day. You absolutely agree with that. So companies that just simply prize that done, right? They're looking at charts or whatever, some kind of dashboard maybe, and they're just saying, well, how many done this sprint? Then the development teams, plural, they're all going to play to that, and they're going to say, we're done, right? The bottom line is just that, like you said, we play games, right? But all of these things aside, who really pays our bills? It's the customer. So if the customer doesn't see value, they don't have to recognize value. Give the product to the customer and let them feel it, touch it, poke it, whatever they do with it. If they love it, great. If they don't, great. Some people are going to go, what do you mean? Okay, fine. Look, if they love it and they tell you they love it, then fine. If they tell you they hate it, I say fine. Here's why. You did what you were supposed to do. You got it in their hands, and now learn why they don't like it, right? As opposed to saying, well, we're done, right? We're done. Customer doesn't know yet, but we're done. Really? Are you?
The old arguing Agile pushback on what you're saying is like, I understand what you're saying and everything, but like what are you gonna do? Change the incentive? You're gonna write a new incentive plan and go to finance and go to the CFO and get it signed off? Like, get out of here, kid! You're just some pointy head that deals with development teams. Get out of here with all your newfangled Scrum Mastery, product management. We know how to do software development.
Yeah, you kind of do. At that point, I'm just going to say, you kind of do, but your customers are leaving you by the droves.
Whenever this topic, something like this comes up, I always tell people, you better fix the money, you better fix the incentives, or you're not fixing these problems. Again, and which again goes back to my point number one is the culture. It's like rooted deep in the culture.
Look, you mentioned the C word, so I just want to kind of just quickly say, what is culture? Can you touch and feel culture? Can you change it? If you can't touch and feel it, how do you change it?
Can you gently massage it?
Can you gently massage it? Yeah, exactly. No, you can't, right? And so culture really is a product of largely three variables. Culture is a product of people, policies, and processes. Now, I will lay on a gentle fourth on there, which is politics. You can definitely impact 3 out of the 4. And the fourth one will take care of itself, one hopes, right? If you can take care of the 3 that you can actually impact, people, the processes, and so on, you can definitely impact those things. So unless you're taking that into account, you're simply just playing games, as we were saying earlier. That's all you're doing, right? And customers will find that out. And when you find out that they've realized all this, it's too late.
Yeah. Well, usually it'll be too late by the time that you turn the ship around. It's going to be like that's the only reason that people try to start correcting culture is because you have very, very, very serious.
You have issues that are already there. Yeah, exactly.
You started going down the issue real early of prioritization. I think you were the first one to mention prioritization. The other shop that I saw this type of thing have a problem with this type of thing is they had I want to stop at the edge of saying poor. They had with their product management facilities.
They had suboptimal product management.
They did
practices,
specifically with regard to prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
They needed a lot of help with prioritization, and also like that. Like if you think about like running a business, if you have this problem where you have 500 bugs, it means the bugs are not getting worked on. And I think of the same way I think of where you have organizations that are on like super old technology, like Windows XP or Windows. Like I remember back in the day when people were on Windows 2000. I was talking about Windows 2000 because I was trying to illustrate like many years later, even when superior operating systems, I don't know, were there superior operating systems in Windows 2000? I don't know. I don't think so. When superior operating systems came along, those business systems were still run on that old Windows 2000 platform because upgrading was deemed as like, well, there's no money in just retesting the software on a later OS. There's no money in that, so I'm not even going to bother. But not until we wanted to do new features that required new operating systems were we forced to go through the upgrade. But again, this is an effect of product. If you don't have product, no one is looking at the future. No one is making these decisions. Maybe you have a really good tech lead, CTO, whatever, who's kind of forcing you to say, hey, this new technology is out and we can't run Windows 2000 machines on whatever, trying to build data models.
This is where Microsoft said, look, if you're not going to upgrade, we're just stopping support. Period.
Right.
So a CTO would say, wow, we need support. Yeah, so Windows
used to have a 10-year support lifetime.
Back then, yes.
Yeah, right. Now AWS is like, it's
7 p.m.
It's Tuesday. We don't support the previous version anymore.
Exactly.
Like they bring you along. Okay, the cloud like forces you along.
That's good and bad also, but we're not going to go there now.
But the point of me bringing this up is if you're in a situation where you have 500 bugs in your backlog and nobody's managing it, and you're a product manager and you come in, or you're a QA manager and you come in, it's going to take a bit of rolling your sleeves up and getting into it. But you can get out of this situation. Here's a previous QA manager's suggestion for getting out of this very real sticky situation that you might find yourself in of, I have 500 bugs in my backlog. Okay, first of all, you need a strategy to maintain your current architecture, no matter how behind you are, to maintain your current architecture and move forward to continually pave that architectural runway so you can launch bigger and bigger planes as technology grows and expands and et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Right.
Here's what I would do immediately. Immediately, I would start going to product and saying whatever our capacity is for our team, all of our teams across the entire program, if you're a larger program, right?
Right.
I demand 20% of your capacity to be put aside for whatever the team, by proxy of a CTO, development leads, whatever. It's up to the team to decide what to bring. But basically, the CTO and or their staff of tech leads or development manager, if you're a small company, you have development manager, right? Whatever technology solutions that need to be upgraded, maintained, implemented, that 20% services that component. So they need to build things into the roadmap and they need to maintain those things. I would say, look, you have a bit of product management function. We need to bring you in and you need to be responsible for maintaining and curating and refining, first of all. But that 20% is going to be dedicated to whatever you say. Let them work on and figure out how to do it. So the remaining 80 is now owned by product management due to normal feature development, because normally when I see this, it's because the business is undisciplined and just wants 110% of the velocity dedicated to new feature development, bring me new features, bring me new clients, spend your nights and weekends doing upgrade work or whatever. I don't want to hear about it. Or worse, send all that stuff over to some kind of architecture platform infrastructure team, and all they do is this grunt work that nobody sees in the middle of the night. And think that you can ship off maintaining our infrastructure to another team. You can't do that.
You cannot do that.
So, sorry, I think you were about to push back on...
No, I wasn't going to push back. I was going to say something here, which is, if you have a situation where you have 500 bugs, clearly it got that way for a reason. So do some RCA on that and figure out why. Yeah. Now that you've come up with your RCA and it's still, let's just assume the worst case scenario. It just says, wow, because it doesn't matter. You have to deal with it now. You could, like you said, allocate capacity, 20%, whatever, right? And just say, go whittle that down, that 500, the backlog of 500, go whittle that down based on some kind of prioritization, based on severity, et cetera, who screams the loudest, you name it, right? Whatever scale. But here's what I want to add to this. If you want to be effective at this, not efficient, effective, right? Why not involve your customer in the prioritization exercise? Get them in the room and say, we got 500 things that have been reported. Some by us internally, some by you. Which of these are your top, pick a number, 20, 50, whatever it is, right? Yep. Top 10% would be 50. Okay, so let's look at these 50 and then focus your effort on those, not the other 450, because they're not that important. Those that matter.
I got sidetracked because what I was going to say is the first thing I would try to do is I would get a panel together. Like if I'm the QA manager, like I just got hired into Brian and Ohm's software development company. Brian and Ohm are harsh taskmasters and only care about features that they can sell. They don't care about fixing things because they plan to sell the company in 2.5 years.
That's right.
And they don't care if there's 1,000 bugs or 500 or whatever the number is, as long as they cash out and bro down at the end of it. So what I would do as a new QA manager, product as well, I would do the same thing as product.
Right.
I come in, I sit down with my panel of people, maybe a QA person, product expert, customer support, product manager, whatever. Basically a nice cross-functional team. People that know the product, people that know the customers, okay? Or maybe I would invite a customer to that panel. I'm not sure yet.
I would advocate that if you can do it.
I'm not sure yet. And what I would try to do is I would go through the 500 items. I'd assign some homework. I go through the 500 items. I try to break them up into categories.
That's right.
I try to break them up into categories because I don't know quite what those categories are, because they'd be kind of dependent on your business, right? You know, maybe like production things or user-facing things or back-end things. I don't know. I don't know what those categories would be. So I'd ask the team, hey, 500 items, try to break them down into categories, try to group them, and then give me a recommendation of which category we should attack first.
Okay.
And this is assuming that I also don't have a basic, like if I have, in other places that I've worked, the QA team and the development team together along with product, you got 3 teams. They will assign severity, priority, criticality, frequency, the ability to replicate. They'll assign those type of things. So it'd be nice to have a matrix of those numbers for each bug, but sometimes that's not possible because it requires you to actually take time to replicate the bug, assuming you can replicate.
And you have 500 to do it.
Yeah. And you have 500. So maybe you're not willing to spend that amount of BTUs to actually get this data. So that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to do that. But at a minimum, let's group them and let's set in what we think is a severity. That maybe we just aggregate all these numbers together into just one number of saying how severe do you think this bug is?
Yep. Listen, I agree. I want to stop you
just
a little bit
give me those two
here
things.
for a second. Grouping and severity is good. I agree with that. However, here's what I want to like gently lean against. So not really pushing back, but maybe a little. We assign the severity. Who's we, right? So you mentioned all these people on the panel. If the customer is optional there, you've missed the mark. Because we could say, this is severe because we can fix it quickly, right? But a customer is the only person, the only persona who can decide what the impact is of this to them. So bring them in and say, what's the severity level for you on this? Yeah. If you do that and then you move on to the other things, I think you have a much better chance of satisfying that customer for whom it matters. Just saying. But I haven't seen this very often, I have to admit. I've seen it one time in a small, very, very small, like a 50-person entrepreneurial startup that really engaged the customer throughout, not at the beginning, at the end, throughout. Right? So every sprint, the customer was in there looking at everything. In that scenario, we never built up a huge backlog of bugs because customers will tell you this is burning, itching, irritable, and barely feel it. Those were the 4 categories. And burning and itching we focused on in that order, right? Burning, gotta fix it. Itching, we'll fix it next sprint or the sprint after. Everything else is, okay, we'll just talk about it later because if it's no longer an issue, we'll just drop it off the list. Or if it becomes burning, fine, we'll treat it that way. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah. We'll talk through the bugs and we'll come up with an order. Basically, we're doing all this so we can come up with an order of
that's
we
exactly
think these should be fixed.
We're rank ordering thing.
Yeah. And maybe things that, whatever, if you do like priority, let's pretend for a second where you have priority 1, 2, and 3, right? Well, 1 is like the most burning stuff and 3 is like, we haven't really seen it. It got reported one time. We never saw it again. Like maybe you just cut the priority 3 stuff and just immediately close like 150 items.
Sure.
Okay. You're like, hey, if we see them again, we'll note them, we'll reopen them, and we'll have new evidence or whatever. They're really old. Like, when I was early in my QA career, I hated
to close
that.
anything.
I hated that.
Yeah.
Because you're saying that we only saw it once. There's a good chance it's a real item, but I was only seen once. And also like the differentiation between was it seen by a customer or was it seen internally?
Oh, that's huge.
And they would say, well, it was only seen internally and we can't figure out how to replicate it again. Just close it. And that would bug me a lot. Here I am in retrospect, like almost 20 years later, and I completely understand. We only saw it once, and we did not do any diligence at the time that we saw it once to figure out
why it happened.
Exactly why it happened.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't stop and say, hey, I have a problem. I don't know what I just did. Can someone help me? And put some brain power on it there. Spend 45 minutes together, sitting together to figure it out. And now we don't know how we did. Just close it.
So a quick anecdote here for like 5 seconds. I worked in a client, like a 2-tier, 3-tier, maybe 3-tier architecture environment for a few years some time ago. So you had the database and you had the middleware and you had the front end, the GUI layer. And often things will be reported that could not be replicated. Right? And then you ask the person reporting what happened after that. And they say, well, I just rebooted my machine. And then what happened? I tried it again. It worked. Those are classic for, we don't really know, but it's not worth the cycles to spend on figuring that out. So we just burn it. We just say, well, just archive it. Now, if you're really paranoid, don't delete them. You can archive them. That's fine. Right? And if they happen again, you can meter against that and say, well, it happened one more time 2 years later, whatever it is. But if you do this, an example of 500 and then you mentioned 150 could be burned. So that's 350. You've already made a reduction. Yeah. And you just rinse and repeat on the priority and severity plus frequency. So there's a little bit of that too, right? How often does it happen? In my scenario, it was a call center environment with 300 people. If it's a real issue and it's a repeatability issue, like people are going to use the same thing over and over and over again. People are calling in and they're taking orders. It's going to happen again. Yeah. So I didn't want to delete them, so I put them away, right? And I can tell you 1 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 50, I don't know, I'm guessing here because it was a while ago, would recur. And when they recur, you say, oh, it happened 6 months ago or a month ago or whenever. So then I go back to my notes that were made in the system and say, when it happened, what was the agent doing, the person answering the phone? What product were they selling? Oh, it's the same product as this one. Maybe the issue is how that product's configured because no other product has it. So you're trying to home in on the RCA analysis is basically what's happening here, but on a need basis. So if it doesn't happen, you don't have to go in cycles on that.
Yeah. But to pivot us away from this topic, I think if you're in the situation where you have 500 bugs in your backlog, either you don't understand what the definition of done is, or your definition of done is inadequate.
Or you don't have a product person who can triage all these things.
I was trying to stick with the triaging kind of goes with prioritization.
Yeah, it does.
We probably should have included it with our discussion of prioritization. But what I'm saying is, what I think of a normal definition of done, basic stuff, it has to have unit tests. It has to have automation baked in. It has to go
passive
through
aggression and all of that.
Yeah.
Security and so forth.
The basics of a definition. We have to peer on things. It needs X number of code reviews. When I think of a culture where this has gotten so out of hand, where you have hundreds of them, I expect that you just don't. All the development standards we were talking about before, internal development standards, coding standards, maybe on the previous podcast where you talked about.
It was on the previous one,
where we talked about what are your standards? Just where you sit together and you write negative tests first, and then your code emerges through the negative tests.
You're not doing any of that when you have 500.
You're not doing any of that, and also it's very difficult to have a definition of done when some of your teams are near shore, onshore. Your teams are offshore, and they don't necessarily communicate with each other. But But the definition of done should be flat across all of the teams, which is where I think a lot of people get in trouble because they don't realize, well, my team has a definition of done, and it's different from that team's definition of done, and it's different. That's what they don't realize. The definition of done should be flat, so that when your team says it's done, that means the automation's done, the testing's done. It went to every environment. We peered on everything. Our QA people were involved from day one. Our product people are a million other things that potentially could be in the DoD. You don't even have a definition of done.
Well, yeah, I agree. First of all, if you have multiple teams, which is the scenario you're talking about, and if you have a program, the scenario I've been in for a while now, the teams typically they believe they have a definition of done because every Scrum Master says, I know what I need to do. And they're checklist driven. So yeah, we need a definition of done. And they get people together and do a little mural exercise and they come up with it. And that's when I come in, somebody, yours is there. What about because you can't deliver anything by a single team. It's got to be a cohesive effort.
Sure.
So then a program level definition of done is created. So I think where you are going with that is it's okay if the team has a nuanced situation where they have some small things that differ from other teams that contribute to the program level definition of done. But I want to go back for a second here. When the customer sees something, it meets the program level definition of done, meaning everybody's done their best, everybody's met everything they need to do, including people like DevOps, all these people. If you don't have them on your team, you have a separate team for DevOps, for example. All of those people have a DoD that combines up and meets up the definition of done for the program. The team level is simply another ingredient in the recipe. It isn't a recipe by itself, right? So where the teams falter is when they say, well, we've met our DoD and we're done. You're not done, right? I hate to use that term too because it's a cliche these days, done. But yeah, so I always coach the teams to say, well, you might be done, but is the customer happy with what you've done? Mm-hmm. What's left? Let's talk about what's left. Mm-hmm. And they go, well, it's them. No, there is no them. It's us, right? And so if you're a coach, if you're anybody and anybody on your teams say us and them, they say the business changed their mind or the customer, it's them. Focus them on the fact that there is no them. This is us, including the customer. I know it's hard because everybody says it's us and the customer. No, it's us. Yep. And only us, because customers are part of you, and if they're not, then you're throwing things at them, right? And sometimes they don't land.
You're saying program definition of done. Like in my head, I'm interpreting it again. I'm taking the word program out of it to interpret it as an individual team that's plugged in to the product that all the rest of the teams are working on can have a more restrictive definition. They can add things. Here's what I'm trying to say. They can add things to the definition of done in addition to what they're doing that all the rest of the teams agree with. But it can't be less. They can't decide like, oh, we're not going to do automation.
That's right. It has to be additive. Yeah. Absolutely correct. So just take a metaphor like car manufacturing, just because I like that one. Or you could take the restaurant metaphor if you want.
The restaurant one, I think, was a cleaner example.
That's a cleaner example. Why don't you tease that one out?
You can say, if you want pasta with the breadstick on the side,
there you go.
Every meal absolutely will have to have pasta with red sauce and a breadstick on the side. But some dishes I might bring you some Parmesan cheese on top.
There you go.
Some dishes I might bring you some fresh, seasoning on top. It's an extra thing our team does that we think accentuates the product.
That's right.
That we bring it to you. But we've all agreed, like, it's definitely going to have pasta, a certain amount.
Sure.
It's definitely going to have red sauce, a certain amount that's made a certain way, and it's definitely going to have a breadstick absolutely every time. We all agreed that all of, I guess our restaurant only sells one thing.
Well, we're going to Olive Garden, I guess. But no, seriously, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Well, you can't just decide, well, I don't want to deal with red sauce this sprint.
Right. So
you
cannot do that.
I'll send you the pasta out to the table first, and then in 10 minutes I'll send the red sauce
out. Great. When the pasta's cold and
Now I can't eat the pasta at all. Like somewhere along the lines, you decided like the customer ordered pasta and red sauce. I'm going to give them a bowl of red sauce. And
they can wait for the pasta.
Send somebody to the store to get pasta. No, you should have a definition of done.
Yeah.
It should be shared across all your cooks in the
Bingo.
kitchen. And there shouldn't be compromising on that. And if you're having problems with that, you need to deal with the problems. Like don't make a bunch of other policies. Deal with the problems of that.
That's right. I want to add a little bit to this. So this analogy is just talking about ingredients and dishes and whatnot, right? But it is. But listen. The thing that matters is every single step in the customer experience. Meaning, so let's stick with the analogy, the restaurant analogy. So we make pasta, we make sauce, we make them at the same time or at the time when everything gets together. But then what if you don't have wait staff that can deliver it to the table in a timely manner, right? These people aren't creating the dish as such, but they are definitely contributing to the customer experience. You better believe that. So then if you have because restaurant is basically a linear system, right? They have orders that come in and orders that go out or products that go out. If you don't balance that, what's going to happen? Think about it. We've all been to restaurants where we get suboptimal service, where the food is cold, it arrives late, something arrives before something else, your salad and your main course arrives at the same time, your soup and your dessert arrives at the same time. Like, that is what we're trying to avoid here.
You know an analogy that actually works really well in this example is high-end restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
High-end restaurants will never bring one thing out at a time. The point here, with the definition of done, the point here is at every high-end restaurant I've ever been to, they will not bring out one piece of food without bringing the whole table's order out, and they commit to this. And that means that the cooks back in the kitchen have to line up all the dishes together to bring them out together, and that's a level of coordination that I guess I'm not trying to say like lesser restaurants, but non-high-end restaurants,
lower end restaurants,
they just don't care about that. That's not.
They haven't perfected the process yet. Let's just say that. Give them the benefit of the doubt. But you're absolutely right. So those high-end restaurants accentuate the customer experience, right? In that way, thereby doubling the chances that you may go back there, right? The perceived quality, it's a real thing.
That's exactly right. Again, we started this podcast after the last podcast where we were talking about quality.
Yeah.
The through line of both these podcasts is quality. The DoD, it's not pitched this way a lot of times. You don't hear it pitched this way a lot of times. It is a way to maintain that high-end restaurant quality in your development process.
Yeah.
That is the way that it's maintained. I feel like we harped on this a while, but we ended up on a really good analogy.
We did
of high-end restaurants, and
now we're both hungry.
I really would like some breadsticks. I'd like to move on to the next category, but
sure.
But we talked about the definition of done, and I feel if we break down the definition of done into a more granular level.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think we should stick with our restaurant analogy going there as well. Because this is like, okay, you have your food coming out. Maybe it comes out all at the same time, but nobody's come back or even come to your table, which is really terrible. But nobody's come back to see if your drinks need replenishing.
Or you need some salt, or you need some, you need some other things. And then commitment to continuous improvement of the development process, which is retrospectives. So basically not skipping retrospectives is in here. And then communication with stakeholders which normally is wrapped in the retrospective. But like if you're not doing Scrum, I could easily see people pushing back to say, well, I'm not doing Scrum, so I don't need a sprint demo and a sprint retrospective because I'm not doing Scrum. I've seen plenty of people do that. I don't need a Scrum Master because I'm not doing Scrum. That's fine. But I need communication with stakeholders, and I need continuous improvement spelled out in my definition of done to say, have we looked at the feature in the field, in production, to see if it meets the customer's actual need? And when that is finished, we can truly say that we are done with this line of work.
I could not agree more.
I mean, I'm stretching with a lot of teams normal DoDs because these are not. Yeah. Some of these are. CI/CD, automation. Okay. Those are normal to be in, but some of these are not normal to be in the definition of done. But I think they probably should be.
They should be, absolutely. Again, I agree with you. When something is just put out into the field and you say, "I'm done."
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not really. Well, so going back to our restaurant metaphor, Brian Ohm's restaurant, whatever we want to call it.
Brian Ohm's software development company turned restaurant.
Yeah, that's right. It. So what happens when you go into a restaurant and everything is going according to plan? Meaning you order something, it comes out, your entire party has all their food delivered at the same time. Everybody's ordered something different. It's hot. Great. It's all correct and it tastes great, right? But then you don't hear from anybody. Your wait person is AWOL. Yeah, that's not good.
All your waters are empty.
That's right. So if you don't have frequent checkpoints from that wait person saying, what else do you need, right? Can I get you another drink? That's what we're talking about here, right? Put it out into the field, but that's not enough. Right? You need to then survey how it's going. Right. Is it going good, bad, ugly, otherwise? And then learn from that. If it's going great, that's okay, but how can you make it better?
What a terrible situation where everyone is working to the best of their ability, did their best to deliver the most difficult part to you. They did all the food, they cooked all things with different cook times, and they arranged it so they all landed on your table hot and ready at the exact same time, and then one person doesn't have silverware. What a letdown, man. That's the easiest thing to resolve. You know what I mean?
So as a restaurant, would you want ownership, right? Would you want to know about that? You should, right? Because that person or that party, in fact, if it's multiple people, guess what? They're going to go and tell people about that. And there's research out there that says a happy customer doesn't really tell more than maybe one or two people. Yeah. But an unhappy customer talks to up to 10 people saying how unhappy they were. This is out there. If you, as a restaurant owner, don't want to hear about it, that's a huge issue, right? Because you're ignoring your customer behavior right there, or the impact of what your efforts are to please your customer. So going back to the business at hand here, your team has developed stuff, tested stuff. It's great, and they delivered it in a timely manner. Great. Yeah. It's now in the customer's hands. Great. You're not done. That's what I would say. And people are listening to this, watching this, are going, what do you mean? We're done. It's in their hands. Isn't that what we wanted to do? Yeah, not quite. That's most of what you wanted to do. Did it really satisfy their need? Right? And that little extra step is huge in its impact. Yeah. Miss that at your peril.
And this is the second podcast we brought this up on, and it's a real high concept for a lot of people.
Of course.
Because it's not like any of the Scrum.
No, it's not taught anywhere.
We don't bring this up. That the idea that communication with your stakeholders after you delivered something, like, you have a real good chance inside the Scrum model to do it as part of your sprint review.
Sure.
To demo the feature, the more the customer puts their hands on it, the better in the sprint review. You have two opportunities. One is the interview, where you actually walk the user through the functionality. You sit there and say, what do you like about this? What's frustrating? Does this capture your need? What's left out? You prompt them with open-ended questions to see where they go. That the synchronous method. The asynchronous method is surveys. Whether it's an after-the-fact survey that you send them, or whether you actually build surveys into your application. In the world of mobile development, we used to do that. We would build surveys into new. So you would hit new functionality, and the application would know whether this is the first time that you've got to that screen or not, and it would know to prompt you with the pop-up that says, hey, did you like that? How was your experience? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And then if you hit thumbs down, it gave you a little box to put text in. Most people skip that stuff.
Sure.
But some people put the text in, and you would capture that, and theoretically, your product people would be reviewing that on a regular basis.
Right.
You get a lot of like gripes that you would expect, but occasionally you get some diamonds. I personally like synchronous. better than asynchronous.
I agree.
I think you get to see the reaction on someone's face, and if someone gives you a sour reaction, you can say, well, what makes you say that? Or what makes you, you know what I mean? You can dig. You can't really dig asynchronously.
You can, and people fake asynchronous as well to a large
and they
degree.
Skip it. So the majority of people skip it.
Yeah, and the other thing they tend to do is, oftentimes you see these things like queries, things like, they just give you a scale, 1 to 10, right? How likely are you to recommend this?
Right.
Okay, but to your point, if you see people hesitating, wincing, body language, you can actually dig deeper there. So I think there's no doubt that's a much better way to go. A lot of times, in coming back to our DoD discussion, a lot of times people don't even think about all of that. They just say, well, it's already delivered to production, so we met that milestone and we're done.
Yeah, right.
Like, you really aren't done. Yeah. It's not enough to get to a point that you think is the end point, because it's not the end point. Yeah. Think about, a lot of people get hung up on this and say, but that's not us, right? That's the marketing people, the sales people, the product people. It's like, that is the problem. That is the problem when people say that's not us. Why are you here? You're here to delight the customer. Listen, not satisfy them, because you satisfy them, that's okay.
Take that the product manager on the podcast said, listen, you can have 500 bugs in your backlog, and your product can have, you might have to tiptoe through your product in order to make it through a transaction successfully. However, if you're truly solving a business problem during your tiptoeing through the happy path through your application, and you're truly involving your customers and really dedicating toward that customer experience, what we're talking about, the actual, when you deliver the meal, it is hot, it is fresh, it tastes good, and it's made exactly the way the customer wants every time. I mean, the customers will deal with a lot of pain in the application to get through that path. I worked on a lot of applications that are really, really terrible once you stray from the path.
Sure.
But the problem that they solve is so painful, the customers are willing to come back again and again and again, no matter how bad the product is, no matter how bad the business is run behind the scenes. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like there's a couple strategies that we gave: segment your bugs, tackle them one at a time. It seems daunting to start with, especially when things are ignored in the past. But you got to start somewhere. The quality starts with you.
Absolutely. I want to just end with the tip, right? Which is, you can have stories, you can have features, you can have this and that. Why don't we talk about putting up a simple statement? And this doesn't have to be a work item. So in the context of the time box, think about all the work within that time box and say, as a team, which is everybody, product, everyone, sales even, right? Customers, get them involved and say, is this really what we're trying to do, right? Yeah. Add to this, please. So if you're missing that, they will tell you. And then you can course correct quicker because you're in the time box, as opposed to like sometimes later when things are already out of hand.
All right. Well, that's this podcast. I don't know if we'll do another one in our QA series of podcasts, but this is fun.
We never say never. We might, especially if you guys let us know in the comments below. Never say never. Subscribe any which way you want. Just hit that button.